Good afternoon, and welcome to the Exploring Energy series presented by Montana Renewable Energy Association. Today we have special guests Aaron Mugaas and Brian Nickish from the Montana Weatherization Training Center about the Exploring Energy series. This is a monthly virtual presentation on energy issues that impact Montana. We hold these on the first Wednesday of every month, starting at noon, to explore renewable energy technology, the latest trends in energy development, and connect with experts that are working in the field and working on the future of our energy system. We do have an archive of past presentations ranging from topics on microgrids, energy subsidies, vehicle to everything integration, the Inflation Reduction Act, and rural America, renewable energy financing, and more available in our archives. So today's Exploring Energy series is all about weatherization and electrification, and I'd love to introduce you all to our presenters now. So we have Aaron Mugaas, Program Director for the Montana Weatherization Training Center. Aaron brings some deep and relevant experience with decades of service in the weatherization industry as a crew member as well as an auditor. He's spent time over his career as a home builder and home inspector. His training includes degrees in biology with focus and attention on land resources and environmental sciences. So his focus at the training center is on health, safety, building science, and hands-on training of practical skills. We also have with us Brian Nickish, the building science instructor. Brian grew up in Forsyth and is grounded on, or his passion for weatherization is founded on experiencing extreme weather events and how that deeply impacts communities. So his passion is about being able to help those who are impacted most. So he has a teaching degree from Montana State University, master's in environmental science from University of Nevada, Reno, and his focus is seeking to improve lives through education and promoting energy efficiency. So really thrilled to have them here and excited to get started. Little background about MREA, we're a nonprofit member-based organization. And if you're so interested, we would love to have you involved in MREA. The only reason we're able to host the Exploring Energy series or some of our education and outreach events is because of members and supporters like yourselves. Few upcoming events that I'd love to give a shout out for: the Missoula Climate and Clean Energy Expo, as well as Climate Solutions Week. I see Abby Huseth and folks from Climate Smart Missoula on the call. Thanks for being here. They're hosting a really excellent event and a week of excellent activities in Missoula with a big, what can we call it? A big ending giant event on September 23rd, the Missoula Climate and Clean Energy Expo at Karis Park. So we will be there and hope to see you as well. Also, if you're in the Helena area, the Helena Sunrun and Clean Energy Expo, raising money to solarize community buildings across Montana, coming up Saturday, October 7th. And the Alternative Energy Resource Organization Expo, also coming up here in October 20th and 21st in Helena. And that the theme of that is moving the needle. So great things coming up. Wanted to make sure you all are aware of it, and I will put those dates and links for more information in the chat. Okay, on with the show. I will pass the floor to Aaron and Brian. Thank you all.
Thanks, McKenna. So glad you asked us to be part of this. MREA is doing great work out there, and we're really happy just to be part of what you're doing. We're Brian and I work at the Montana Weatherization Training Center. We have a little bit of a presentation for you about what we do and who we are. I'm sitting right here in our we call it our lab, and this is where we teach students how to work on furnaces, how to run blower doors, how to use infrared cameras, and how to do air sealing and insulation and stuff like that. So if we have time, maybe I'll give you a little tour. I'm gonna start sharing my presentation here. So we wanted to talk to you a little bit today about weatherization and what that means. What part of the puzzle is that in this electrification and using alternative energy, say efficiently and effectively in our homes and, buildings for that matter. I'll give you a little background about the Weatherization Center first. We're weatherization's a federally funded program, started in the 70s. And started in Maine. They started doing community action agencies, started, just helping people make their homes more energy efficient by insulation and air sealing. And it's real rough and dirty work, right? It's I call it the front lines of energy savings. Besides, the reduce, reuse, recycle that we all probably should be doing every day, this kind of work is kind of the front lines, the things that need done in most structures, existing structures in America. The DOE is the main administrator of the program, and along with some other participants also. So this is the mission, reduce energy costs for low-income families and elderly, disabled, and children. And also we pay a lot of attention to the health and safety inside a home, indoor air quality, and things like that. Right now, the program supports a lot of jobs, and we work on a lot of homes every year. $372 annual energy savings per home, and that's an average, but there's a pretty wide range of what we do to homes. It could be $50 a year, or it could be $1,000 a year. Depends on the age of the home and what we ended up doing on the home. So we've affected 7 million families since 1976. Who does weatherization work? People wonder what this weatherization is. So the community action agencies throughout the country, here in Bozeman, we call it the HRDC, the Human Resource Development Council, but there's a lot of different names. But they all are set up and generally, federally and locally funded to take care of issues in communities. And one of the things they do is energy assistance. So they help people pay their power bills when they can't pay their bills. And and then weatherization, the weatherization program piggybacks on that, and we work on those clients' homes to make them more energy efficient. So what do we do on houses? We are basically a shell program. It's the very unglamorous part of energy savings. Nobody ever sees most of the work we do. It's air sealing, insulation, making sure heating systems are running efficiently, or even running at all. Some people don't even have heat when we show up. We might replace their heating system. And that's the opportunity we have now also when we're doing these replacements to, upgrade the efficiency or change the fuel to an electric source, like a heat pump. We do a lot of duct work, sealing of ducting and that kind of thing. And then base load measures, we call the base load measures, are, things that people use in their home that aren't heating and cooling, right? Running the refrigerator, the water heater, that kind of thing, lighting. So those are the things that we do on homes. At some point along the way, the DOE decided that kind of need to do this work consistently, throughout the country and use the best practices that we could. So they started these training centers in the 90s. MSU got a grant. I forget the exact year, but it was the early 90s, through the extension service and to administer training. I had a neighbor over here on Peach Street in Bozeman who when I told him I was doing weatherization work, he said, "Oh yeah, I used to do that back in the 80s. It was just a bunch of hippies with caulk guns." And that's kind of, it's evolved greatly from really basic just kind of common sense work to a really structured system. We use a lot of building science concepts and diagnostic tools now, to do the work. So we're the Montana Weatherization Training Center. We're still going since the 90s. This is a couple pictures of our some instructors we've had over the years and some students. We're over on Osterman Drive, by the way. So if you ever are around, come and check us out by Gallatin College. So the Montana, so we're a very structured training center. So we're not just, teaching people how to, blow insulation and, use a caulk gun. We actually follow a pretty structured program. So, and that was set up by the DOE. Some pretty smart minds went into creating our standard, what we call our standard curriculum. Of course, we do modify it and update it. And we are also certified by the Interstate Renewable Energy Council. And they come and, look at our curriculum, look at our building, all that kind of stuff. We also are an EPA training center, so we can do lead safe training, lead inspector training, and things like that. OSHA, we're an OSHA training provider, so we do OSHA trainings, OSHA 10 and 30. And then we're also a BPI test center, so we can talk, that's a whole nother subject, but the Building Performance Institute is the third party who certifies, who gives us our professional certifications in weatherization. So energy auditor, building analyst professional, and the quality control inspector. Those are all certifications that have to be acquired through experience and testing. Let's see. Who attends the courses here? Primarily, it's weatherization employees at the community action agencies. Probably 95%. So these are people who are hired by the weatherization programs to do the work, and they come here and they get close to, or I mean, sometimes more, sometimes a little less, about 150 hours of formal training in the first couple of years that they work at the agency. We're primarily Montana, and we get a handful of students from the surrounding states. The titles of the workers in the weatherization program are crew workers, crew leaders, energy auditors, and quality control inspectors. And then other building trades come here to our center as well, and they take our OSHA courses and our lead safe courses and our lead inspector courses. That's not to say that we couldn't get more people to do our energy auditor type courses, especially since they have a third party certification associated with them. And that's one thing that that we can see ourselves providing for people who need to do energy analysis for the funding that's currently available. Right now, nobody knows exactly what's going to be required of analysis of buildings before and after work is done. But so improving the shell of the home, or weatherizing, is probably the first step in electrification, especially if we're talking about putting in cold climate heat pumps. The shell needs to be pretty darn good before those things are going to work efficiently and effectively. So I'll turn this over to Brian right now, and he's going to talk a little bit about some building science concepts and just a little bit about what it means to work on the shell of a home.
All right. Well, thank you, Aaron. Yeah, we'll go in. As Aaron had mentioned, really, as we go through and we look at weatherization, it's again, morphed into much more than the hippies with caulk. And so really we're taking a scientific approach to what we're doing and really trying to track down airflow. And basically, as we pay to heat and cool our home, that is going to be really expensive air. So we want to make sure that that air that we've conditioned stays inside the house. So as we look at a home, we're going to have both direct leakage, where that's just holes directly to the outdoors, or also things like indirect leakage, where we have holes that come in through the openings in the walls, through the attic, any number of other penetrations that can occur in the house. So anywhere we have plumbing or electrical or any sort of holes that get drilled inside the house to bring in the things that we need, that represents an opportunity for air to escape. So we want to make sure that when we're paying to heat and cool that air, that it stays where we want it and it's not leaving the home. When we look at air leakage, the biggest thing with air leakage is it's driven by both temperature and pressure differences inside and outside the house. So if we have a higher temperature or pressure difference, that means that the airflow is going to happen at an increased rate. So the higher the temperature is outside relative to the inside, or the colder the temperature is, the more quickly that we're going to lose that conditioned air. So by going through and identifying all of these different sources of air leakage throughout the home, we're hoping to be able to slow down that airflow. And by slowing that down, that allows us to heat and cool less, and we get more bang for the buck as we're paying for that. So, and the biggest thing with this is, as we get to those extreme temperatures, those really high or really cold temperatures, and we're going to have an increase in that heat and airflow. So this is a picture of just some general sites or common sites where we can have air leakage. So things like recessed lights, dryer vents, electrical outlets, the attic, kitchen vents, the crawl space in our homes. All of these are areas that have air leakage from the conditioned living space into either the attic or the outdoors. So being able to control this air as we go through, then again, we're able to make that money go further. So we're using less fossil fuels or electricity in order to heat and cool the home. So the level of comfort that, when we get to that nice temperature that we like, it stays there for a longer amount of time if we're able to control this air leakage. The primary sites where we really focus on with the weatherization program is really looking mostly at the floors, the walls, and the ceilings, with dealing with the insulation. We have gotten to the point where a lot of the times we make homes really, really tight, and we need to actually install some mechanical ventilation to make sure that the house is getting the right amount of airflow and isn't building up indoor pollutants. So we also have that aspect. So just between those two measures, we're really looking, over 40% of the air infiltration. If we do have doors and windows that can potentially be replaced if they're in really bad shape, typically these are more difficult areas to try to get the cost savings from replacing that. But if we're able to combine that with the air sealing methods and the insulation, it's actually able to allow us to sometimes create savings that we'll be able to pay for new doors and windows. And contrary to the air sealing measures that we typically focus on, a lot of the clients really, you go in there as a weatherizer, and the first thing they want to do is that they assume that they're getting new doors and windows, and that's usually not necessarily the case. But as we go through and change some of these air sealing measures, that cost savings can bleed into being able to replace some doors and windows. Going through and having any sort of plumbing penetrations or electrical run into the house, that is another source of air leakage that is fairly easy to control with some spray foam or different methods to slow down that air leakage. And then we have some places with their fireplace, which is essentially just a big chase right to the outside. We have a lot of air exchange in houses that have fireplaces, and we want to make sure that those places aren't losing all of their heat right up that chimney. And as we go through and actually look at homes, it's very difficult because we can't see air and we can't really see the movement of air. We want to make sure that we have the right tools to be able to diagnose that. And so we can actually create a pressure inside the house that will allow us to see where the air movement is at. So things that we're not able to see with the naked eye, when we pressurize the house or depressurize the house, we can actually pull air into the house and see where the leakage is. And that is going to provide us with the best air sealing opportunities. Here we can see that on the left, we have a kitchen soffit that is running without the blower door. So that would just be under normal conditions that you would see outside. And then, so these darker areas are going to be the areas that are going to be colder. And then you can see as we turn on the blower door, we actually see much more airflow that begins coming through here. So the blower door is really simulating about a 20-mile-an-hour wind blowing on the house, which isn't uncommon for a lot of days, especially in areas like Livingston and Great Falls around the state. So it's not an unrealistic amount of pressure that's being put into this house. And with having the right technology, having these infrared cameras that the weatherization organizations have, we can actually take that and really dial in where we're doing the air sealing and making sure that the work that we're being done is addressing the areas of greatest need. And this is another picture just showing the effect of the airflow. So as you look along the framing is one of the spots that isn't going to be able to do a whole lot about it, because there's always going to be a deficiency in insulation there. And as you turn that blower door on, you can see these streaks that are showing the airflow or the effects of the airflow as that's coming into the house. So we have a light that's probably around 100 degrees, and have that, and this air that's coming into the house is actually quite warm. So as we go through, we want to make sure and try and seal that off, because as we have that air coming into the house, that is going to be changing the temperature of our conditioned air. So if we're paying to heat and cool, we want that air to be in the house and then be circulating and not necessarily communicating with the air that's outside. When we look at a building, typically we have several different layers that are involved in this. And some of the layers we can help out with air sealing, and some of them there's not a lot that we can do. So having a good air boundary or pressure boundary with some drywall, and then creating some air sealing with having a really good continuous layer of insulation. And the building materials with this, the nice thing is typically these values are just going to be added together. So the R value that you see on your insulation as you're installing that into the wall, that's actually going to be a value that's added to the drywall, and the framing and the plywood and any of the building materials are put. They all have a small amount of resistance to that heat transfer. So if we have a really, really high R value, then that's going to slow the heat loss from the house. So we're slowing that air movement if we have a high R value. So as we look at that, typically the higher the R value, the better that we're going to have that resistance to the airflow. And we just want to make sure that this is also a continuous barrier. So that's one of the things that if you have insulation, it doesn't matter if you have a very, very high R value. If it's not installed properly and it's not performing correctly, then it's not going to have that same rating that you get on the package there. So with weatherization, that is the nice thing. There are several different steps. So not only does the crew go and do the installation, there's also an auditor that's going to be checking their work, in addition to a quality control inspector. So there are several different layers of the program that ensure that the products that are being installed are installed properly and up to the manufacturer's specifications, so that they are able to perform for at least 10 years and sometimes even much longer than that. So as we look at the priorities of a weatherization crew, the first thing is going to be looking at that air sealing, and again, making sure that the air that we're heating and cooling is staying inside the house. And so the air sealing, the opportunities for the air sealing are going to be determined by the blower door and then the zone pressure diagnostics. So all the equipment that we're using, we're just making sure that the air is flowing throughout the house and we have as much control of that conditioned air as possible. And in addition, with that air sealing, if we have any sort of holes in the HVAC system and that heated and cooled air does not have the ability to get to where we want it, we can go through and actually seal it up as well. So there are tests that we can use to see how leaky the ducts in the house are. And then once we have the air sealing and we have that air controlled and going where we want, we can then look at adding insulation in. So from everything to the attic, to the walls, to the floor cavities, all of this is trying to create a thermal boundary around the house that allows us to keep that conditioned air inside. So going through and air sealing, if we don't have control of where that conditioned air is going and the duct system is leaky, then the insulation isn't going to be as effective. So as Aaron kind of talked about, with a lot of these energy upgrades, if we're not going through and actually weatherizing these homes first, we're not getting the optimum level of performance that we could get. And a lot of times going through and air sealing and adding insulation will actually make it cheaper for the heating and cooling units, because sometimes you're actually sealing a house up to the point where you can actually downsize the unit and actually use a smaller unit to provide the same level of comfort. One of the things that we go through with our building shell class, again, we talked about windows and doors having about a 25% contribution to the air leakage. So this is just looking at all the parts of a window, and the fact that, you know, most people usually don't think too much about a window. They may look and see that it has a couple of panes of glass and that's about it. But in the weatherization process, they actually go through and we're able to train employees on all of the different parts. So if a window isn't functioning properly, if it's not operable, there are different things that we can do. So rather than just simply replacing the window, going through and adjusting the way that that window is hung or the way that it is in the opening, a lot of times we can actually fix the issue without having to do a full replacement of that window. So when we look at fixing windows or doing the treatments, if there's any sort of broken glass, obviously that's going to have a huge impact on the ability for that air to flow through that. Or locks, if we don't have a good seal, we'll have some airflow that is able to come through if we don't have the windows locked together. If the weather stripping is old and not performing well, so, and the interior trim as well. So all of these are different areas of a window that can have leakage. And these can all be addressed a lot of times without having to replace through that window, and again, going through that very large expense. And same thing with the door. Doors, oftentimes throughout the history of a house, they're going to settle and not necessarily be performing or hanging the way that they were installed. So educating people about how to make adjustments for doors can save a lot of money on a door replacement. Mobile home doors especially can be several hundreds of dollars, and going through and trying to get energy savings on a door when it costs several $100s, it could take 50 to 100 years to replace that. So just going and making these adjustments as a weatherizer, putting weather strip in and doing some more basic measures can actually provide the same energy savings and not have to replace an entire door. So again, just looking at weather stripping, door stops, door sweeps, making sure that it has a really good seal to prevent that air leakage, making sure that the locks and hinges are working properly, and just making sure that the door is in a good, safe working condition. And once we go through and look at the appliances and do that, so one of the things that we want to look at is actually going to be the energy consumption of a house when we take out the heating and cooling aspect. So for this is a big part of the education for the clients, is making sure that they know that heating and cooling takes up a pretty big part of their electric bill, but there are always going to be things that can be reduced that isn't based on the season. So typically the summer and the winter are going to see higher bills for a lot of houses. And so we want to take that and kind of level that out and see what an energy bill would be without taking into account that heating and cooling. So things like lighting, which is going to be used year round, water heaters, and then looking at the water usage by potentially installing some low flow water fixtures. So the base load does have a lot of different factors that can affect it. So, homes with higher number of occupants, you would expect to have a higher base load. The size and efficiency of the equipment, want to make sure that it's appropriately sized, and the habits of the occupants. So, it's not necessarily going to be enough to turn your lights off if you're not in a room, but all of the small things that occupants can do and the ability to educate them about where their energy use is it's all going to contribute to this reduction in the energy. So going through and educating the clients is going to potentially help out with reducing the base load energy use. So that's going to provide year-round savings. And as we look at the base loads, again, we're looking at probably 40 to 50% that's taken into the heating and cooling, which really leaves us with about 40% of the other things that we can save on. So water heating is a very big one. Looking at energy efficient appliances and doing the upgrades there. Lighting is possibility. Again, we can have some potential with upgrading to LED lights, especially if they have old incandescent bulbs. And then really old refrigerators can be pretty big energy hogs as well. So we'll look at a couple of these in more depth. So with going through and reducing the water heater settings, so the recommended temperature for energy efficiency for a water heater is going to be 120 degrees. This is the minimum temperature to be able to keep bacteria from growing inside the tank. And simply reducing that temperature from 140 degrees down to 120 degrees can look at potentially $100 in energy savings a year, which is pretty significant especially for a lot of low income clients that we're dealing with. Every dollar that they can save is going to go quite a ways And this is a measure that really is free, just turning that down and making sure that their water heater is set to the right temperature. All that is turning the dial. So the ability to save money there is, again, virtually free, and they're going to have that right temperature water and still not have any health hazard. So going through, just looking at some of the different uses for the hot water use. So, washing your clothes in cold water versus warm water, taking shorter showers, less baths, and installing the low flow aerators and low flow shower heads can have a significant impact on that hot water use as well. So in addition to decreasing the temperature, we can also adjust these areas and educating the clients about these possibilities of these areas of free energy savings. Refrigerators are typically pretty expensive, and looking at this, the biggest thing is just making sure that a new refrigerator being brought in is going to be an Energy Star model and not just another energy hog. For lighting, LED lighting has come a long way, and the price has really dropped. I know that at Costco in particular, you can usually get the Northwestern Energy discount for that. So 8-pack of bulbs is usually about like $3 at Costco when they have that rebate going. So seeing that, the 10% usage drop down to a lot less, and you don't have to sacrifice the quality of lighting there. And so really this is kind of sums up what we're trying to do is we're trying to go through and create energy saving opportunities that intersect everybody's interest, and it's not going to have any sort of sacrifice in performance. So customers have their appliances they're comfortable with. We have the manufacturers that are there, and then the utility program. So all of these entities are working together. So we want to find kind of this Goldilocks zone in the middle that's able to produce something that's going to use less energy while not sacrificing the performance. And see. And again, as we look at this, just going through, education really is the key to this. So as we go through and we begin talking about the process, so whether it's weatherization or energy efficiency, all of this results in a need to be able to educate people not only about what technology is out there, but actually to be able to show these tips and these energy savings that can be cheap or free that they can do to help their home. So even if they don't necessarily have the money to go through and make all these upgrades, there are still things that they can do to make sure that they're going to be reducing their energy use. Because ultimately what we're looking at is going through and decreasing the greenhouse gas emissions. So going through, because saving money is going to result in this. So if they're decreasing their energy use, not only is their bill going to go down, but we're also going to have that decrease in the greenhouse gas emissions there. And for that, just going and educating them is going to go through and actually provide these opportunities to be put in place. So going through and having them look, a lot of times it's difficult to have a very high expensive refrigerator, but the amount of money that they're going to save over the life cycle of that refrigerator typically is going to pay for that appliance by itself. You will find different motivations for that. Some people will be environmentally motivated, and that's fine. If people are making the choices to make Energy Star appliances, it doesn't matter what they're doing, whether they're just trying to save money or they're trying to save energy. Ultimately, the goal is the same. We want to make sure that everybody is going and making decisions that will reduce the energy use, because in the grand scheme of things, that's going to be the thing that allows them to save money. And having a brand like Energy Star, so I'm sure most people have seen the yellow tags all around the stores as you go and look for appliances. So one of the few sources that is actually still pretty well trusted and respected is this Energy Star label. So we can go through and look at that. So the Energy Star program, in the 30 or so years that it's been implemented, has been very beneficial to the customers and does have quite a bit of sway. And for that, I have a few slides about heat pumps, but we can look and see if there are any questions first, because if there aren't a lot of questions, I can go in and talk about heat pumps for a few minutes, but we can look at some questions first as well.
Brian, how about I think there's interest in the heat pump content. So how about if you give it a couple of minutes and then we'll jump to questions?
Okay, absolutely, yeah. So yeah, heat pumps really are the with the IRA funding especially is definitely one of the major pushes that's occurring. And with heat pumps, the nice thing about heat pumps is they have a much higher efficiency typically than your typical air conditioner or heating unit. So we're using the same technology, so we're just using refrigeration. And what the heat pumps are able to do is they're just moving the heat from inside to outside. So if we have hot air on the outside and we want that heat inside, we're able to transport that in through compression and expansion of a refrigerant. And then same thing with the winter time. So even when it's really, really cold outside, we have the ability to pull air or pull heat from the air and actually use that to heat our homes. And so a lot of times, because we're using these refrigerants, these chemicals, as we use the compression and refrigerant cycle as part of that, it actually allows us, if we put in 1 kilowatt hour of electricity, we're actually able to get 3 to 4 kilowatt hours of heating or cooling out of that system. So a lot of times you'll see that heat pumps are 300 to 400% efficient. And really what that is it's using the refrigerant to get more BTUs or more electricity than we would get with just heating that air directly, heating or cooling that air directly. And so we'll look at that a little bit. So the heat, most of the heat that we get is going to come from the sun. So we can get a little bit as we're burning the fossil fuels. So we come through, we get that air from the sun. And as we go, it's able to be extracted by the air pump or by the heat pump and then forced inside. So the nice thing again about this is the heating source is going to be free. So we get that energy from the sun. We're not having to put a whole lot of electricity into this. We're letting the refrigerant do all of that work. And the same is true when we look at the cooling mode. So we're just doing this in the reverse. So we have the air that is already there. So if we have warm air, we're just working on getting that out of the house. And so that air is then pumped into the refrigerant. And again, so we're either compressing the refrigerant or we're allowing that to expand and expel the heat outside of the house. So really what we're doing is when we're looking at the cooling, we're allowing this refrigerant to absorb all of the heat that's in the building, and then it's going to be expelled outside the building. And there are several different names that you may see with heat pumps. So all of them are basically categories of heat pumps, and then they become more and more specific as you go down. But really, they're all performing the same function. The biggest thing now is, especially at our climate, we're looking at the cold climate air source heat pumps becoming more and more viable. So with these, the performance of heat pumps is we're really able to get almost 75% efficiency, or we're able to get a lot of efficiency even at temperatures down to about 13 below. Right now, the technology for cold climate heat pumps, they start to really dwindle when you get down to the 20 below temperatures, and anything below 20 below. Really, that starts turning these heat pumps into electric resistance heaters, which has the efficiency of 100%. But we don't get that added benefit as we get these temperatures that are very, very cold. The part of that is really none of our furnaces work really well at those very, very cold temperatures. So going through and having this where most of the time we're getting about 250% efficiency all the way up to maybe even 500% as we're doing some of the cooling with these heat pumps. And that's really what's driving the interest in these, is the fact that we're not paying to directly heat or cool that air. It's just moving the air around in a very efficient manner. And as we do that, it allows us to have our heating and cooling needs met with much less electricity. So the standard, or the measure for heat pumps, is actually coefficient of performance. And so we do that. Our air conditioner units are typically measured in SEER, or seasonal energy efficiency rating. So the newer units are in the 20 range as we go through and look at that. And so the COP is a little bit different because, again, this is looking at the amount of energy that is put into a heat pump versus the amount that you get out. So if we put in 1 kilowatt hour of electricity with these heat pumps, we can actually, again, get 2 to 5 kilowatt hours of heating or cooling out of those systems. So we have a much higher efficiency as we start moving that air around versus trying to heat and cool it directly. And so that's, with all of our combustion appliances, that's exactly what we're doing now, is we're directly heating and cooling that air. And so that's all subject to the air leakage. So rather than trying to heat and cool that air, using these heat pumps allows us to get this increased efficiency by using the heat that is already in the air and taking advantage of these refrigerants that allow us to move the air in a very efficient manner. So as we look at heat pumps, really we look at the cost savings, because again, as we're putting a kilowatt in, we're getting between 2 and 5 kilowatt hours of heating and cooling back from them. And the added benefit of this is many places in Montana don't have air conditioning. They may just have a heater. Well, because the heat pumps have the refrigerant, if all we have to do is reverse that refrigerant cycle inside of these units, so not only do we get heating installed into a space, but we can also use cooling as well. So all of that is done within the same unit. You don't need a separate unit for the cooling. We can have increased capacity. So as we go through, just making sure that, again, the temperatures are going to be where we want. And we avoid all of the carbon monoxide and other gases that are produced in this combustion heating process. So we're switching over from burning fossil fuels and going into electric heating. And with this, again, we get this increased efficiency. So there is the advantage of being able to potentially have less greenhouse gases emitted through our heating and cooling needs, which, as we looked at earlier, was, again, about 50% of the energy usage in homes. And so the final slide here, again, just looking as we look at very cold temperatures. So the heat pumps that were first on the market that were developed, if you get to these really cold temperatures, you don't have any capacity to have that efficient airflow. And we have that as, again, just becoming an electric heater. and becoming very, very expensive to heat at that point. And this newer technology is, again, quite encouraging. We go to still having 72% capacity to handle this heating load, even when we're at 13 below. And again, some of the newer technologies are even looking at being down to about 20 below. So we do get those cold snaps in Montana, but they are, less frequent. But so even in these very cold temperatures, we do have the ability to still have a heat pump work. So it's definitely encouraging there.
Awesome. Thanks, Brian. And I'm glad that you dug into the heat pump content, because I think that we actually got a few questions related to that. So keeping track of the chat here, and we will end at top of the hour at 1 o'clock, but we do have time for a few questions. I'll start with a comment made about if people are thinking about weatherization, where to start, and starting with your utility provider, whether that be electricity or if you use natural gas, checking with your utility, whether that's Northwestern, MDU, Rural Electric, Co-op, to see if they offer energy audits. Northwestern just started doing their complimentary or their free energy audits in person again. They were virtual for a long time during COVID, but they are back to being in person. MDU, from what I know, does offer energy audits, but only to their gas customers in Montana. And it's a little slower in terms of getting the application in. If other folks know about that, please weigh in. But that was one note in the chat. And then in some specific questions, this one could be for you, Brian, about a hydronic baseboard heating, if a heat pump could replace that boiler system, or if you know.
Yeah. Oh, good. I don't know if you know, but there's air to water heat pumps as well. There's a company in Bozeman, Liquid Solar, who has gone to completely advocating for those air to water systems. He really believes in them. He started out doing solar water heating, but he's like, these systems are so efficient. It's almost, you're just harnessing the sun's energy in a different way, right? Out of the air, instead of directly from heat tubes on your roof. So yes, you can do that. I'm not sure exactly the nuts and bolts involved with that, but yeah.
Great. And then a question in the chat here for an amateur weatherizer who may not be becoming a consultant or a weatherizer through the weatherization training program. If you're just a homeowner who's trying to get a grip on what you could do to weatherize your home, what advice might you have for them?
I think you mentioned if you're Northwest Energy customer, their energy audit is pretty good. They can tell you where to focus your efforts. And if you're just, trying to do this, kind of get some analysis done in your home by a professional. Otherwise, I mean, you can look in your attic, look at your basement walls, look in your crawl space, see what if and how much insulation is on, in various places. You can find a lot of stuff online about, R values and things like that. You kind of rate your own house. Fixing the obvious air leaks, of course, a lot of people do that. Even when I was doing energy audits, a lot of people knew where the air leaks were, right? Because they live in the house, they know how it performs. Yeah, but that Northwest Energy, they give you kind of a punch list of what needs done in your home, and that's really good if you have Northwest Energy available. If you're a customer of Northwest Energy.
Yeah, and I would. Oh, sorry. I would say
ahead.
another thing you can do is really just going and walking through the aisles at Home Depot. Because you don't realize how many weatherization products are out there, or the different air sealing opportunities. So really just going through it and looking. So looking in the door section, they have all of these different products that are available that are being used, and so just doing that and just kind of becoming familiar with really what's out there is beneficial. And there are a lot of really good YouTube channels as well that go through the aspects of air sealing, and a bottle of caulk will go quite a long way with solving a lot of the issues that you have.
There are a few, I will add, there are a few home inspectors, independent people who can do a blower door, kind of pinpoint those air leaks for you, give you an analysis of your insulation and what you need to do. So you might be able to hire somebody to do that. I will say just real quick that weatherization, typically these agencies aren't doing private home work. It's all people on the program. There is the ability, and some programs have started a for-profit sector, and when they do that, they can typically work on any home. So maybe there'll be a movement, because these are highly trained people that know exactly how to find this stuff in your home and tell you what you need to do. It's just they're not available. So maybe with this IRA money and this additional work that might be out there, some of these agencies might start forming those for-profit sections that could do this.
And I think as a final question here, that I'm trying to bundle some of the themes that I'm getting in the chat, but question about where these types of trainings happen outside of Bozeman. Does the Weatherization Training Center, I know, is a grant through Extension, but where else does this happen, if anywhere? And maybe that's identifying a problem we might have in the coming years to solve.
Yeah, there's about 20, I think that's last count, about 25 of these training centers like ours throughout the country that just train weatherizers. And some states have maybe a little bit more, I don't want to say, have some programs in place also that train people outside of weatherization. There's a company in Helena, actually, Saturn Energy, who has a bunch of online content for training people to do mostly energy auditor type work, not necessarily the weatherizing work. Yeah, I hope that answers. There's various programs that are pretty good, like the HERS rating, the Energy Star rating, and those all. There's training providers for those programs as well. And I'm not sure. I know NCAT in Butte used to be one. I'm not sure where that's going right now, but all those programs basically teach the same things, but they come at it in a little bit different way. So.
I think we've got time for. Oh yes, go ahead, Aaron.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say we've got time for one more question from the audience here, and if we don't hear one, I've got one kind of to close us out. Any other questions?
Well, this is Karen Hilding. I would just think, our son is a builder in Missoula, and I didn't know if there are programs that kind of reach out to those builders in other communities. If obviously this center is in Bozeman and is doing this good work, but and maybe it's through some other programs that they do trainings in Missoula, but that's what I was curious about.
Yeah, so we train all weatherization employees throughout the state and surrounding states. As far as a builder, they'd have to come here to get that.
Yeah, so they have to come to Bozeman to do the training. Yeah, okay.
We do some field. Sometimes we go out and travel to different communities, but mostly here.
Yeah. Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. And to close us out, Aaron and Brian, I'd like to just hear your thoughts on what the barriers to adoption, because it seems like we've got this niche of weatherization for low income that's being utilized. Of course, we could always use more, but for Montana at large, if weatherization is such an important piece of the puzzle when we're thinking about climate or energy cost savings or any of these other motivators mentioned, what in your view should be done in terms of the industry and the jobs market in Montana? It's a big question, but would love to hear your take. And we can start with Brian and close out with Aaron.
Yeah, I think really the biggest thing is that really that education piece, and it's really a daunting task to start out and realize that there's so much to cover. I mean, obviously we offer tons and tons of classes and formal training. There the opportunities that are there, like I said, by just going and looking at products that are available and doing that, and just doing weatherization and search on YouTube. There's a lot that people that can learn that are curious about it, and so as you start getting involved in it, then it becomes a little bit less daunting. And so really just if you do have that interest in weatherizing, you don't really know where to start. Just like with anything, just kind of become the YouTube expert on it, and then you'll go and kind of discover what's available out there, and then really that'll kind of lead to questions. So it's hard to put the the onus on homeowners and things like that, but as you are a homeowner or a renter, I mean, really, again, everybody likes to pay less money for their electrical bill. So sometimes there's just a little bit of legwork that you can do up front, and taking that information and sharing that with your friends. So
Yeah, I think it's kind of a mindset of the greater, the communities that we live in. Unfortunately, the weatherizing work, the shell work is unseen and not very glamorous. So when you're deciding as a family, you want to utilize some of this IRA money. Say you have an ailing heat system, maybe it's 20 years old. You say, well, I'm gonna put that into a heat pump. I would love to weatherize also at the same time, but I just don't have that money to do that, even though it's probably the most important thing to do. So I'm not sure. And then so there's that issue, but then there's also the workforce issue, having people like contractors and things trained and then promoting this type of work as well. Maybe that comes from, as much as I hate to say it, regulations and codes, and basically forcing people to do these things. We can really only do that on new construction. Retrofitting homes is people's choice, right? It's their home. So yeah.
This is Karen Hilding, and I wonder, is it possible for, I'm with the city of Whitefish, is it possible for a couple of cities in the Flathead to sponsor, to have you guys come and do a training in our area? Would that be a possibility? Do you know?
Yeah, I mean, we have traveled to various communities and done, specific trainings. We could cook something up. We have, we've gone to Missoula and Billings and Great Falls and done, specific things for groups. It would just be a matter of
helpful, since affordable housing, part of the problem with the affordable housing, especially in the winter, is the cost for heating. So
yep and
awesome. Glad to see good connections being made. The beauty of the Renewable Energy Association, because we like this.
We'll be in touch.
Yeah.
Thanks. All right. Well, that concludes. We're a little over time. Thank you for all who stuck around for the Q&A section. I'm going to end our recording here.